And welcome back to the locker room, and we do have Boyles on the line. Matthew Boyle, how are you going?
Yeah, good. Neil, you?
Very good. Now, I think we can officially call you Matthew Boyle from PAV, and just remind people if they're interested in just reading some interesting sports stories, that they should get onto Pinch Hitters on Facebook. That'd be the easiest way to find all that stuff, wouldn't it?
Yeah. We've got the Pinch Hitters with Boz and Pav. We've got at the moment we're doing a two podcasts a week, and sort of putting up our weekly, or putting up sort of our previews for the upcoming season in both the AFL and NRL on our Facebook page.
Couple of things I'm going to throw at you first. The news headlines have described AFLX as a yawn fest. Would that be, we're being harsh, are we?
I think we're being a little bit harsh. I mean, I think the alternative would be them just playing practice matches against, other teams anyway. So the idea that it's a little bit different makes it, a bit exciting. And, I didn't mind. I watched the St Kilda games yesterday, and I didn't mind the way it was. And, it was a bit exciting. It was, over pretty quickly, and, it was, it is what it is. But again, it's practice match footy. It doesn't really mean much, but I would have thought a yawn fest was probably a little bit harsh. Yeah.
So some people suggested it might be better if it was played on because there's only 10 players, if it was played on maybe a soccer ground or something like that, and try to make a smaller area. So it is something actually a little bit different.
Yeah.
As well as, in the ground. I don't know whether that would make any difference or not, but I guess they're trying to do something different because the pre-season cups had its day.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I just think we sort of seem to find fault with everything we sort of put up. But I guess that's the other thing is, I guess the other aspect of doing this is it's sort of it's a long season for some of the sides that are expected to finish in the lower reaches, and if you're sort of playing standard footy and we see them get beaten playing against top sides with not many of their stars out in the park, it sort of makes it even longer. At least with this, you sort of St Kilda won one, lost one, Carlton lost two, but what does it actually mean for the real stuff? We've got no idea. So I think it's good in that regard. I think the idea of playing less actual proper practice matches is good for the interest for the real season. So I think it's a bit interesting and a novelty. I don't know how well it will last, but the AFL are pretty keen on it, and I'm sure plenty of eyes sort of watched it over the last couple of days. My biggest problem with it, of course, is that you have to listen to Brian Taylor commentate. But
yeah, I think that's a fair comment. So I didn't mind James Brayshaw's commentary. He's exciting, but St Kilda. How do you think they're going to go this campaign?
Well, I think this is the year that the expectations have to be a little bit higher. I think there was quite a bit of expectation last year, which was a little bit premature. I think St Kilda finished last in 2014, give or take. So we're only a few years removed from that. So I think now's that time where you've got an awful lot of core players that have sort of played that 60 to 70 game mark, or will hit that sort of mark this year. And I think that's when you sort of really start seeing the side playing really consistent football. I think last year they showed what they can do on a couple of occasions where they sort of really sort of took it right up to Richmond. Bad kicking cost them games in Adelaide and in Perth, and if those sort of wins had have been there too, like they would have been knocking on the door of the finals, but also would have announced themselves as a and that's what sides on the upward curve sort of announce themselves is in those interstate wins. So I think they have realistic finals aspirations, but I think that's also true of an awful lot of sides. I think that sort of 6 to 12, 6 to 13 is really going to be stacked with teams that are really sort of knocking on that door, like your Melbournes, your Collingwoods, and those sort of sides that have all been sort of had expectations for a few years now. So it's going to be hard to get in there, but they would be expecting it themselves, and I think the supporter base would be sort of expecting it as well. And I think if things go well, I can't see a reason why they can't make finals. but there's no guarantees in footy, is there?
No, absolutely not. Mate, I just looking at a story there about Rugby Australia, and they've unveiled basically don't have a weight for age policy, but a size for age policy. So in the juniors, I think it goes from under 10 to about under 15, they can move players up and down according to their height and their weight rather than their age. So it's a bit like that ad that you see on the TV, the great big kid crashing through all the little kids, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing, and it's sort of the problem at some of these sort of younger or junior competitions in the west of Sydney is that you have a lot of kids that develop a lot quicker than some other kids, and there's sort of the concern being that you have these much bigger kids sort of trampling all over the younger kids, that you sort of lose those players from playing. So I guess the idea is to try to sort of shift them around so they're playing against similar body sizes. The problem then, I guess, comes is that although a kid might be big for his age, how far up can you really shift him in the sense that when does it become a disadvantage for him when he's playing against kids that are 4 or 5 years older than him? So they may be the same size, but maturity and things like that make it a little bit difficult. So it's a hard balancing act, I would think.
Yeah, and so they're trying to get a bit of flexibility into that to make it, I suppose, fairer and give kids a chance to play appropriately. Yeah.
And that's the thing. And it's a game of, you look at a rugby field, and it is a game of many different sizes. So you want to have that kid that's not so big still playing, because you don't want it just to be marauding big men playing, and you scare off the next George Gregan because he gets trampled on by a 14-year-old that's twice his size.
Absolutely. Now I don't know whether it's officially over or not yet, the summer of cricket. After the success of the Ashes, do you think it's just sort of lost its edge during the ODIs and the T20s and now over in New Zealand, or?
Yeah, I think that there's always that little bit of a lull now, the way that the summer's sort of played, where you have the one days afterwards, especially when you've got big series like England or even India, but the Ashes especially, where we've regained the Ashes. That's the high point of the summer. What can the ODIs even add to that? So although there is some worrying signs about how badly Australia approached the one days and the way they selected their side, at the end of the day, it's sort of hard to be all that sort of fussed when we've actually done what we wanted to do this summer. I think Cricket Australia have made a real mess of their own schedule, which isn't helped by the ICC's future tours schedule, but they've got to do something about it, because we have the Big Bash, which takes all of the attention away from everybody, and then we sort of try to whack games in and around and all over the shop, and it just doesn't make any sense. And also the fact that you sort of basically, like, England come here, play in Cairns and Darwin and these sort of places, and then basically get unleashed on the MCG about 2 weeks after they've landed. Or not the MCG, the Gabba, 2 weeks after they've landed in Australia, and 2 weeks after that the Ashes are decided. It's not really conducive to having a visiting side properly challenge the home side, and it's equally true when Australia tours other countries as well, and that's, you sort of see it where home sides are just winning all the time, and it's only teams like South Africa that sort of really win away series, or when you sort of play against a minnow. Yeah.
I think that's a good point. Now, mate, we've only got a minute or two to go, and the pretense that we got you on was to look at what's going to happen in rugby unions. How far away is the rugby union season, and have they got over the big battle when they got rid of Western Force?
So the Super Rugby competition starts this weekend. The South African Conference kicks off this weekend. The Australian and New Zealand conferences kick off next weekend. The Rebels, our Melbourne Rebels, have been pretty disappointing in their 2 practice matches. They've copped 2 big hammerings from the Waratahs and the Brumbies. The hope, obviously, with the Western Force being removed, the messy sort of saga that we sort of talked about all through last year, the hope being that will strengthen the rest of the Australian sides, and maybe that's sort of true of maybe the Waratahs and the Brumbies, and maybe not so much the Rebels, who were one of the the poorer performed Australian teams last year and have been most of the time they've been in the competition.
So they're likely to struggle again, we'd imagine?
It looks that way. I think, and obviously the competition is going to be a lot more easy to understand. It's now just sort of the three different conferences. You know, the Australian sides play against each other twice. One of those Australian sides is now a Japanese side. So that's the only sort of confusion. But yeah, I think it'll be a little bit more. It'll make a little bit more sense. The fact that there's only three conferences, so there's only three conference winners that go through, and then the rest of the sides are based on their actual performances. Mean we won't have the ridiculous situation last year where you had New Zealand sides missing out on the finals while the Brumbies made it with a win-loss record that was in the negative. So the system's now set up that if the New Zealand sides are all better than the rest, they can qualify for the finals. So you're actually going to have a genuine final series. And still at the same time, there's the Australian sides are playing to make the spot in the finals. I think overall that the Australian sides will be a little bit more competitive than they were last year. They struggled to beat New Zealand teams last year. We'll see possibly a difference in that. And the Wallabies have got a big summer as well, a big season as well. They've got on top of the rugby championship, they also have 3 tests against the Irish, who are currently ranked 4, while Australia's ranked 3. So that'll be a really good test series in the middle of the year.
That'll come through mid-year, you're saying?
Yeah. So that'll be the mid-year Australian tests, and then like the rugby championships will happen after that. So it's a big year in the sense that next year's a World Cup year, so there's a few less test matches this year. But on top of the rugby championship and the Bledisloe Cup that we play for every year, we'll play 3 games against a really strong Irish team. So that'll be really interesting to see where we are placed. The Australians sort of showed some promising signs against the Kiwis last year after the first test walloping, and some of that they lost some of that ground in the November tour of Europe, where they sort of copped a touch up from both England and Scotland.
Yep, no worries. Boz, we'll catch up again in a couple of weeks. Thanks for your thoughts on that, and go the Pinch Hitters.
Thanks, mate.